All right, we are recording. This is meeting 40 of the Tinkerbell contributors meetings. I am Nahum Shaman. I'll be hosting today. I've hit record, so this is being recorded and will be shared out, I believe, to our YouTube channel as soon as we get the recording back. Welcome to everyone. As a reminder, I've put a link to the agenda doc in the Slack chat. We have a code of conduct that is linked from there, so everyone be excellent to each other. If any new faces, if anyone wants to introduce themselves, now is the time for that. No obligation. Feel free to unmute yourself and say hello.
Hello, I think it's one of these new guys. Yes. Well, I'm part of the Daniel teams, and I've joined it last week as part of the developer relations team, and I've been working in Equinix for a long time, but now moving from sales to marketing.
Cool. Well, welcome.
My name is Chris Privateer. I'm also a new hire over at Equinix Metal and on under Dan as well, and so hoping to be contributing a bit soon.
Great, welcome.
Hey, my name is Aravind. I work on the same team with Micah. I was just my first meeting, just joining in to say hi to everyone.
Great, welcome.
I guess I'll introduce myself too, because I didn't last time. I'm Steven. I'm on the provisioning team at Equinix as well with Nahum, and I'm still kind of learning the ropes and hopefully going to be helping out with Tinkerbell soon.
Welcome. All right. We have a spot for show and tell. I don't know if anyone had any particularly exciting show and tell that they wanted to do. And we can come back to that if after we go through the other topics, if people think of something. In the meantime, so I noted before we hit record, Dan says that the calendar invite is still wrong. We did manage to get administrative control back over the Tinkerbell contributors Google group. We haven't yet figured out a good way to send out the updated calendar invite. So that is we're still aware of that and working on that, but we have not fixed that yet. All right. Oh, and Dan Finneran is putting something for show and tell. Dan, do you want to share your screen briefly? And
sure. Let me just open this up. So I don't know what else this is going to show you, but luckily I don't tend to write anything too exciting on Twitter anyway. So I've been part of a number of conversations in a Slack group, which is basically a bunch of Intel and Google engineers and a few other places all around extensions to KExec and things like that. So some of the stuff that we do in Tinkerbell is to pivot as quickly as we can into other operating systems using the KExec system call inside the Linux kernel. So effectively, a lot of the tasks we do involve streaming an operating system to disk, getting the Linux kernel in hook or OC to scan that new disk, find all the partitions on there, and then there's two things we typically will do. We'll either reboot or we will mount one of the newly written partitions. We will find a Linux kernel and RAM disk, load those into memory using the KExec syscall load function, and then we do a syscall reboot of type KExec. And what happens then is that the existing Linux kernel will pivot into the new Linux kernel, and we will immediately start booting that newly provisioned operating system. So that saves us reboots and shutdowns and all of the power on self-tests, jazz and things like that. That predominantly only works with Linux kernels. However, now we have added support for ESXi kernels. So we can effectively boot directly into an ESXi kernel. I think I demoed that a little while ago, but it's like 6 seconds to stream ESXi to a local disk, and then we are booting directly into ESXi. The work that Trammell and some of the others have been doing inside a project called EDK, which is part of the Tiano core, it's all the UEFI stuff. Effectively, what this allows us to do is instead of loading another Linux kernel to pivot into, we can load a clever little payload, which is called the UEFI payload. And then we basically can pivot into that. And that will allow us to start the UEFI boot process again. So effectively, comparably, it'd be like starting grub again and then finding the kernel and booting into that. This will allow us to effectively jump into the Windows bootloader and start Windows booting. This was a proof of concept in 2019, and then nobody did anything with it for 2 years. And then there's been a lot of work on it recently. And there's hopefully, well, so we've already put an action together that contains this at the moment. And it has worked once or twice for me, but there's still work that's going on there to make it more stable. But hopefully what this means is any operating system will pretty much all act the same in the future, write them and then boot directly into them in the same manner using the special UEFI payload. So there's lots of work ongoing. We already have an action that I think should be in a pretty good place now to add to the Action Hub. And I'm looking forward for this to become something pretty good in the future. So that's my show and tell.
Great, thank you. That'll be really nice. Where were we? Okay. I think the next agenda item is Micas.
Yeah. Hey, thanks. So just wanted to bring this back up. I think we have most people have signed off on this, but just wanted to put out kind of a last call for comments on the K3 resource model proposal and PR to Tink. As far as the initial PR is just the API types. I've already started work on like adding a controller. I've done all the POC work, but it'll be a mainline PR for the controller, and then I'll start implementing things like the shim and Tink API, and that'll probably be more invasive in that it will touch existing code paths instead of just new code paths. But we'll try to make that, again, we'll have the flag for everything. But so, and these are initial PRs are just non-invasive new code paths that aren't touched, just to get some things in there.
Great. Yeah, this is exciting work. Lots of people I know are very excited about it, not just on your end. So it's exciting.
You know, people on my end.
I'm assuming people on your end are also excited. Yeah. Cool.
Thanks for putting up with all my comments and addressing all of those too. So I think this is great. The alternative is doing something like this in crossplane and just putting everything in here natively and improving all the prospects for what our API for Tinkerbell looks like in the future by inheriting Kubernetes concepts. Seems like a no-brainer. Everybody should just use Kubernetes as their API, right?
We could pull Kubernetes apart so you don't have to use full Kubernetes for everything. That'd be great.
Yeah. Which part do we call Kubernetes then?
Right, exactly. Yep. But no, thank you for your comments. It's been really, I think it's better for it.
Cool. All right. So the only other thing that's on the agenda that I added from the if my brain would work today, that'd be great. From the triage party last week, there's an item for discussion about I guess it's phrased as should we only support libvirt and vagrant. I assume that's basically actually saying, should we drop VirtualBox based on VirtualBox having broken on the what's it called? On the latest version of macOS. So presumably it breaks and then it fixes, or maybe it's not even working on the ARM64 Macs. So if anyone has thoughts or comments, feel free to reply in that ticket, but feel free to also go ahead, Micah.
Yeah, quick question. Is this just saying we'd still have like Docker Compose? This is just talking about virtualization.
Yeah, so it's
Okay.
all Docker Compose based. The question is, should we support that Docker Compose on top of, so we support it like spinning up a VirtualBox environment for it, or spinning up a libvirt environment, or I guess what was the other one?
Oh, for the workers.
And bigger.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm
So
just thinking the bare
question is-
metal, like if I want to run
Yeah,
it.
yeah. No.
Okay.
Yes, it's still like my sense is it's still Docker Compose. The question is, should we be providing tooling and expecting VirtualBox to work and supporting that, or is the support burden there too much? And can we just make the assumption that if you have a Mac, either you'll use one of these other things, or I don't know. So that's the issue. People should feel free to comment on if they have thoughts, because Manny is not here today, so and he opened that issue. So I guess the big question is, if anyone here is currently like heavily using the sandbox with VirtualBox, feel free to let us know in that thread. But otherwise, and anyone seeing this video later, but otherwise, it may improve our ability to support the sandbox if we can drop and not have to support quite so many things and not have to have such a big testing matrix as we develop features.
I don't have a direct comment on that, but I did have an open issue where I was trying to take advantage of the Terraform directory because I wanted to consume it as a module so that I could deploy Equinix Metal devices and run the Terraform module in that environment, and then use the Tinkerbell Terraform provider against that to interact with the Tinkerbell environment that was brought up on Equinix Metal. That's not what I want to talk about. It's Micah, do you know if Amazon in their bare metal offering has the ability to support Tinkerbell environments like this from a user perspective? Can you provision bare metal and run Tinkerbell on it? And is that maybe a Terraform environment that could be made available?
Not at this point, no. I mean, the bare metal target for us really is like bring your own server, not EC2, because EC2, you don't have L2, you don't have, yeah, it's AMI based, right? Yeah, so no.
Thanks.
We're using like, we have like a test environment with like a vCenter. So using that, but that's like real servers.
All right. So I guess we've used very little time so far. There is nothing currently on the agenda. I'm happy to, if anyone has other stuff they want to discuss, we can discuss it. Otherwise, we can give people back time.
Is that the turkey bell I hear?
I just wanted to like bring up a small discussion. If everyone else is, then I can go. Or
Sure.
Okay. Yeah. So I was just like again, just to introduce myself, I work on the same team and project with Micah. So I was just like working on a POC, like where we integrated like CAPT with PBJ. I was just wondering, so I saw like on the README and stuff, like, and I also reached out in the channel. Like, I was just wondering if that integration is something that the community as a whole is interested in, like to like take back, or is that something that I saw in the README that you said it's like currently not merged together and it's supposed to be handled externally? So is that like how it's gonna be, or do we like, is there any like interest to take it back up and have it integrated? Just wanted to bring the question up.
Yeah, so of the people here, I am probably the person least bad to answer that question. I am not necessarily the best person to answer that question. So I can tell you briefly how it's being used at Equinix Metal today, and we can sort of lean into that discussion. So within Equinix Metal, PB&J runs as a service in our clusters so that a proprietary API is capable of saying like, hey, please go power cycle this machine. So there have been sort of multiple thoughts around how to do it within the open source project, and also thoughts around sort of as Equinix is trying to get Tinkerbell into production, how we would use it in production. And there's sort of a couple of different theories on that. So one of them is continue to let that proprietary API call out to PB&J, in which case it doesn't really need to be integrated directly into Tinkerbell. Another one is there's been talk of having, again, I'm not the best person to speak to this, but the idea being you'd love to have a workflow where there is an action that causes a machine to reboot. And so the question is, where does that run? How does it have access to the credentials for the BMC to be able to power cycle the machine? Does it run on a privileged worker somewhere? Does a credential get sent to it? That's all sort of up in the air. And ultimately, I think as an open source project, especially for anyone who is using Tinkerbell who is not within Equinix Metal, if that code is useful and you have a way to integrate it somehow, I think that is very interesting, especially if that's something that like you can do a demo of like, oh, here's my home lab of machines, and I put the BMC credentials in this place, and I was able to then use PB&J to have this workflow run and have the machine power cycled at the right time. Go ahead, Micah.
Yeah, I'm also not equipped to make a definitive statement on this, but with the Kubernetes resource model design, it's by design allowing external controllers to talk to the Kubernetes API and react based on changes to workflows or whatever. So the idea is you could have, and using Kubernetes primitives like field ownership. So you can say that this field on the workflow is owned by the PB&J controller, hypothetically, and PB&J can reach out and do things like actions like you're saying, power on a machine, or power it off, or configure it to net boot, or whatever it is.
Yeah,
right?
that's
like
the main. Yeah, the main things it does are power things on and off, set the BMC credentials, and set the boot device.
Right, and then you could, I mean, at that point you have Kubernetes APIs, and you can do however you want. If you want to make it a secret reference, or if you want to make it, some vault credential, whatever it is, we can make. But I intentionally descoped that from my proposal so that it could be a separate proposal upstream to say, how do we want to do PB&J in the open source side, so that anyone can use it with their workflows without necessarily like CAPI cluster API for Tinkerbell.
I'm guessing none of that is an actual answer to your question, but hopefully it is useful discussion for future thought.
Yeah, no, I just wanted to start the discussion off. Like, so if there's like something and that in the POC comes in useful, like I can maybe bring it up in the next meeting. So yeah. And
again, if hopefully you are not currently stuck, but if you are finding yourself stuck, definitely reach out again on Slack, and hopefully we can get you unstuck again.
Awesome. Yeah. Thanks, guys.
Just gonna make a note in the notes.
Dan, is your vPro stuff in a branch somewhere? Or is it on your laptop?
It's not on my laptop. It's on a VM. But it's simplistic. It's basically there's an Intel vPro Go library, which I managed to find, that has a bunch of horrendous hard-coded XML stuff.
I might have found that same library when I was poking around. Yeah, it's
gross. It's one of the grossest things I've ever seen. But I tested it and it turned my Nux on and off. So I was like, okay, well that's the start. Was it? Yeah, I think it's XML stuff. So I'll pick that back up again at some point or another, and then that should allow us to have kind of an end-to-end demo. And I also think Jason's using a bunch of AMD little boxes, and they support a thing called Dash, which I've not come across before. So I'm not sure what exists for them. It has they have out-of-bound management, so they have like a web UI. So in worst case scenario, there must be some curl magic we could probably do there. Again, quite gross, but you know, it would allow us to simulate. In worst case, we could actually write a fake BMC that then translates to you know, vPro or Dash stuff. So you know, like things look professional even though they're not under the covers.
The other thing you can do is if you look at, so PB&J is built on top of a different piece of software called BMClib. So, and BMClib has a notion of providers, I think. So you should be able to build out like a vPro provider for BMClib, and a call to PB&J with the right credentials. It would, as it attempts IPMI and all those other backends, it would at some point attempt vPro. And I think there's support for hinting that you can say like, hey, by the way, this is the vendor for the BMC, and that like it's possible that if someone passed in, I'm not super familiar with that code. It's possible that you can sidestep trying too many things. But yeah, so BMClib would be the place to look if you end up picking that up and trying to integrate it.
Yeah, absolutely. Cool. I'm gonna have to drop. So it's been a pleasure, and I will catch you all later on.
All right. Well, I think that feels like the end. So momentarily I will stop recording, but thank you all for joining. Again, you can reach out on Slack, or the mailing list is rather quiet, but the mailing list does go to people's inboxes. So yeah, all right. For those celebrating, happy Thanksgiving, and yeah, take care.